Let me know if it seems slow.
Okay. Seems like it's okay. Okay, we're live, so we're gonna just wait a little bit. And I'm gonna email you the link.
Oh, do you need me to do anything else
No.
besides just be on here?
You could share the link.
Okay, sure the link. Yeah.
I'll I'm texting and emailing you.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and I'm doing it myself. So, let's we could get started anyway. See if there's anyone in here. Okay, nobody's awake, but we could get started anyway because this will be legacy then. If anyone wants to roll in,
Kinda
yeah, it is. So this is how social media divides us, part two. We have another video, how social media divides us. Collab with Live with the Bike and Zach Elwood. Zach wrote a really comprehensive article on the anxiety that social media brings, and we discussed kind of like when you're on social media, you're in your own bubble because you could choose who to follow and who to not follow. So you start thinking that what you see is how the rest of the world is when it's just like your kind of own perception. And that
Right.
when these bubbles start colliding, that's when the animosity starts, because it's like if we don't have crossover, then or even if we do have crossover and just like differing views on the same topic, then that's where the collisions start. And online, I don't have to listen to what you say, you don't have to listen to what I say. We could choose, and we could just like sign off whenever. So this progresses into, or sorry, let me introduce Zach Elwood, author of Reading Poker Tales. You have a podcast, and this topic of how social media divides us, including like the social dilemma on Netflix, has really hit the stride, especially with like elections and so on. So
Yeah, I think more people are talking about the polarization issues. I think more people are starting to see, like there's an unreasonable level of animosity there. Because I think you can, for both sides, you can be like, well, there's a degree of polarization that makes sense on like issues, like we disagree on issues, but then
right.
there's like a degree of animosity, unreasonable animosity that's just related to like you're in this other group that I've decided is bad, and that's where it gets into the unreasonable territory. And I think, yeah, like you were saying, I think there's definitely a factor of social media contributing to this, and we see it in other things too, the poker world, wherever. Yeah.
So the parkour world, especially recently, we've had Phil Hellmuth versus Antonio Spendiari. Their rivalry, started in person. They're both from, they had part of their careers in the Bay Area, and then they had confrontations in the tournament scene and cash games. So that's what we might consider a healthier rivalry, I guess. And then it comes to now in 2020, 5 years after Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu started going at it online. So what's interesting about Doug Polk is like if you look at his stuff like 5 years ago, like his online presence, like when he does hand analysis, it's like more clean and very personalized. And when he asked Negreanu or talked to Negreanu online, he was very respectful. He was just like I acknowledge and admire what you did for poker, but saying that you could jump in 25-50 on Poker Stars and just win after 2 weeks is ridiculous, which is completely true. Like that shit is competitive as hell back then, and now it's just like infinitely worse. So Doug felt disrespected in a sense, and this is one of the things also between online and live. Online, me having an esports background, who's the best is just like clear. You're going international, and like whoever wins. Whereas live, you could talk big, you could manipulate like what people see, and just like, are you the best? I don't know. You say you are, but until you hit that like hard competition, then you really don't know.
When live is so slow too, it's so much harder to get a sense, and yeah, it's hard to compare. Yeah.
They're both different environments. So then and I guess Negreanu probably just ignored Doug or something, and then it just escalated to a point where Doug started calling out Negreanu statements like, this is untrue, this is like the more rake is better, some of the blackface stuff, which was clearly not good, but back then it's just like you could be foolish. And if Negreanu
it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, but part of the thing is Negreanu never said, okay, this is wrong. He just kind of just said, oh, I asked my black friends, which is like, what are they supposed to say? And it's rough. Then fast forward where they're just like going at it against each other online. And we talked about this last time, and it's just like, when people, and this goes with Helmet too, when people say a statement and different people just define that statement or that concept differently. This happens a lot in fiction, I guess. So there's an anime Death Note where like the main character Light and L, they define justice differently. And in X-Men Days of Future Past, like Professor X and Magneto define abandon differently. Like where Professor X is like, abandoning somebody is like not giving them a home and protecting them, whereas like Magneto's definition of abandoning them is like not being on the front lines. So it's like this personal definition, which is different from what the word is the same, but people just interpret the same word differently.
Right. We've all got our own definitions and conceptions of what's right and what things mean. Yeah.
So oftentimes in poker, which is intangible, especially with like a single hand, and obviously from an online background, Doug Polk's like, yeah, we got to play X thousands of hands, whereas like Negreanu and the pros pre-internet of the live generation were like, oh, I'm exploitative in this moment is like where I shine, which the media kind of manipulated in their favor during the moneymaker boom to show them as like super godly. So it's like these two worlds colliding that define what is a good poker player like differently.
Right. Is good the ability to win against quite tough competition on a regular basis, or is great defined by your ability to beat how you handle recreational players and how well you exploit them? There's different ways to view it. Yeah. Or is great the ability to get into great games, stuff like that.
These are all completely different skill sets. So I was on with Ryan Fee on PokerCraft, and it was discussed. It's just like he and I and many other people, but because he and I were talking about our own personal cases, we totally burned our bridges to like get in private games. Like we're just like, even if we aren't in our peak performance, we are perceived as like super pros or pros, so just like clearly not getting in. And then the essence of what Phil Hellmuth is saying his skill is like, and he's known for, is extracting value from recreational players, which he agitates them, knows how they're going to act, which after I went from a competitive high stakes scene back down to propping low stakes, they are massively different skill sets. Like a lot of tells and live reads that you see, in the low stakes, which, your book analyzes greatly, that doesn't exist in the high competitive scene. So the skill sets of like the high competitive scene is like getting in your opponent's head, knowing what he's going to do, and like exactly one-upping him. Whereas like the low stakes is like, it's like, oh man, do you have it? Oh, I raise all in. Like, okay, he's got the nuts, right? That is a very valuable skill set at the low and sometimes even the mid stakes. But at the high stakes, it's just completely non-existent. I mean, there is like a little bit of weird meta stuff.
Yeah, it can happen. Yeah. But yeah, I see. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So like, in an ideal world, the best poker player does everything, but it's hard because there's a lack of concrete measurement of, what we all acknowledge these are skill sets, but how do you define these things? Because like I said, for something like StarCraft's like, you win, that's it. Game over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like chess. Yeah, it's like chess is very
exactly
clear, yeah.
Chess is finite, and poker is not really finite. It's obviously there's like a lot of luck. and a lot of variants, as we saw with Daniel Negreanu versus Doug Polk, November 4th on Poker Go. The first 200 hands were played live. So, Doug tried some sexy plays in which they didn't work out, and he also got coolered a lot. And I think he was down like 116,500, which was like 300 big blinds, aka 3 buy-ins at the 100 big blind structure. Which,
after how many hands?
200 hands, which is an insanely small sample size, but the results, like when we see the numbers, it's like 204 and no limit, but we see the 116,500 loss. So that alters the viewer's perception. Like, oh, Doug was a favorite, he talks big. And then we know it is. It's so hard to be like, that's not how poker works. Like, look at how many winners Negreanu was dealt. Did Negreanu play better than Polk in that session? Yeah, probably, with the bluff catching, but Negreanu also has dealt more winners than Doug. So, or, key winners, at least. I wasn't keeping track of the individual winners. Like, the big pots, went Negreanu's way, which is frequently what happens when we talk about running bad in poker. Like, if you're just dealt losers, you can't win, no matter how good you are. I mean, occasionally you could turn, like, a losing hand into a winning hand through a bluff or something, but for the most part, if two people have strong hands, the cards are, going to get flipped face up. And whoever is dealt the winning hand is going to end up, with the better results.
Right, that's a very small sample size, yeah.
So as we were talking about last time, we kind of presumed that once we're face to face, and this is the premise of how social media divides us, your article, like when Negreanu and Polk were going to be face to face, there'd be far less tension, which we saw, and people were even like needling them, saying, oh, they're best friends, they're not really enemies.
Right, people were upset. They're like, what's with the love fest? It's like, why? I don't understand why anyone's surprised. It's like, come on.
I don't know. I was hoping there'd be a little bit of jabs, but like people said for Antonio Spendiari and Phil Hellmuth, they're both showsmen, and they're both they enjoy the jabs. Whereas Negreanu's always been a pretty nice person. Is he perfect? Right. No, he slips up a bit here and there, but generally he tries to be nice with the general.
Yeah, when he's in public, and his angry moments are just when he's by himself, like on his video or whatever. The things that people have showed him being unreasonable or angry or whatever are just him, by himself, which is like part of what social media does to us. We're by, like you were saying this morning, we're by ourselves, we're in our own worlds, we don't have to answer to anyone else in any sort of social responsibility way. And you put us in front of people and we have different instincts. We feel responsible for how we act to people, because people are more real when they're right in front of us.
What's up to Lucky Luciano? Yeah, early morning. This is an impromptu live stream. I just texted Zach Elwood this morning, and we were talking yesterday after the Doug Polk match, or we were just exchanging words, and just on social media, somebody complimented Zach. He was like, yeah, you were right. Like, if they're there in person, there's just going to be less animosity. Don't get me wrong. I still think they both don't like each other.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
they both...
But that's it. Yeah, that's interesting how much, even with people that don't like each other, how much, in person will naturally, people start to become more likable to us. Even if if you put them together in a room, probably for a while, they would end up, liking each other a lot more than they did. It's just how social in-person interactions work. It's yeah.
So do you have any words for the phenomenon on top of what you wrote?
Well, I just thought it was interesting seeing everybody react to it, because everybody wants drama and conflict and blood. Yeah, everyone's like, what's with the love fest? They're like smitten high school, boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever people were saying. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it's easy to understand. I don't think anyone who I don't think too many people would be surprised by it, really, because it's online brings out the worst stuff. And even in that Mike Dentale Kate Hall thing, I mean, they were quite civil to each other, and then we're like joking
It,
around a little bit.
yeah,
It's like
that one there was definitely more like animosity
there
clear
was
there
more,
too.
but
Yeah,
it wasn't like, they didn't interact like they did online. It wasn't that
yeah,
level of which is like none of this stuff is surprising. And the sad part is just that I think that because online has become the predominant way, or so common a way we communicate, especially with COVID, locking us in so much more. The sad part is like all these things reach a crescendo and we never have in-person interactions to kind of reduce the animosity, and it's like in the old days that this stuff would never get to this level. You wouldn't, it's just such an unnatural thing to interact with people in this way and have things build up and be like, I hate this person. I mean, I have several people that I wouldn't talk to. I mean, they probably wouldn't talk to me mainly, but just through social media in the poker world, we wouldn't be able to talk. And it's because of like things that they got angry at me for saying online and like blocked me online. And I'm like, I never block anyone online because it's like, I try to, if I'm going to persuade someone, I'm not going to do it by blocking them or whatever, or have them see my point of view or whatever. But it's like these are the things that online does to us. And then with Doug and Negreanu, of course, there's the extra level of like they have. We talked about this on the first call, but they definitely have a motivation to increase the drama online and get people to view it. There's a financial motivation there too, which you could kind of make an analogy to politics. It's like politicians have a motivation to increase animosity and increase division because they get the votes out. They rile people up in the same way Negreanu and Polk rile people up to get them to view their event or whatever, or follow them, or there's incentives that increase all of these things. And it's just kind of interesting in that regard. Yeah.
So again, like the loudest voices, and this happens to Live at the Bike as well, are not necessarily the right ones. So like a lot of people are complaining that there was no animosity, it was like a friendship thing. But the viewership, like I don't know the peak concurrent, but I saw 34,000, which is insane. So the total viewership must be like over 100,000, and the amount of thumbs up was just nuts. It was just like nuts, and there were so few thumbs down. So people clearly wanted to watch this. Right. But if you just look at the chat, the most vocal people, you would think that it was like, it was very negative. Yeah, they were like, "What the hell is this?" And it's like, obviously we see this on Live with the Bike too. It's just like you see like these random ass negative comments, and they're just there to like, ruin people's day. It's like you have a nice picnic, and they just want it. I just feel like the attitude's like. This group of people's having a picnic, and they're just having a conversation. Things are going down. The guy just like wants to run through, the picnic and just like ruin everything.
Streakers.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Your point is, it's exactly that. It's like we can't pay attention to the loudest, most extreme voices. Like if we paid attention, for Doug and Negreanu's thing, if people actually took that seriously, like what's with why don't they fight more in person? It's like that's such a small percentage of people saying that, and like you can imagine, I feel like there's like an analogy to politics there too, where it's like the most extreme voices, people are listening too much to the most extreme voices and not enough to the people that are like, can't we what's with all the animosity, which is like most people just want people to get along and not be so hateful. But if you listen to the most extreme voices, you end up like, making more productions that are, built around division and hate, and that just, that doesn't really matter that much in entertainment sense. Like, we do that with lots of sporting events, but, you can see how it's like, it starts to be a problem. Like the more it becomes prevalent in society, like this kind of dynamic, it's like when most people are, I'm sure it's fun to have more animosity in sporting events like the Doug and Negreanu thing. So it's not like I fault people for that. Like it would be more fun for me to watch like them fighting with each other verbally or whatever. Like that's more exciting. There's no doubt about that. But it's like, in the real world terms, it's like, more animosity is not a good thing.
Yeah, and that's a bit of the balance and the problem, because it's like you and I want less animosity, but there's other groups of people where they thrive off of that. So it's their livelihood versus ours, or our perspective. So part of it's like GTO versus exploitative. Like riling the crowd is like kind of emotionally exploitative, and that's their shtick. In which like I think we're trying to be like, hey, this is the knowledge base. Let's try to spread it. And the last time we talked in the part one, you were saying humans weren't built for this, and like yeah, humans probably weren't built for like a lot of things, which is why there's parents, there's schooling, there's mentors, there's idols. We kind of like try to, if we respect their qualities, we try to like gear towards that direction, and just like because in a natural state, I mean, we're just animals, right? Like
Yeah, you're right. I mean, what are we? Yeah, all this stuff's unnatural. Like looking everything around us is where we live in a world of our own creation. So you're right that it's about adjusting to our environment and learning like what's bad and what's good in terms of the effects of these technologies on us. But yeah, I was just thinking with Doug and Negreanu, I think they are. The interesting thing is I think Doug and Negreanu are fundamentally nice people when it comes to like interacting with other people. Like their
yeah.
instinct is to be nice, and I think I think Polk, I think Doug even he probably would see a benefit to him to even being more mean and more divisive in person when playing Negreanu. But I think he's just such a fundamentally like nice guy that even though he acts like tough online, I think he's such a fundamentally nice guy that he couldn't even bring himself to do that, even if he saw a benefit to it.
I don't think he's beyond it, but I think after the first hand, so Negreanu won the first hand, he bluff caught Doug, and then Negreanu joked, "Oh, I'm leaving," cashing out the win. So part of it is like they're still poker players. They still live in the same world, have a very similar culture. One of the things is a generation gap. So I'm like in between Negreanu and Polk, whereas like Negreanu is before me, but I kind of understand their world. But online came out a little bit after, in which I was in, and then Doug with a video game esports background was like almost exclusively online, probably had a little bit of live, but like I understand both of their cultures, and this is one of the issues too with same thing with my parents' generation and the people younger than me. It's like I remember we grew up without internet, and then the internet just was thrust into us, and we're like, we were probably like, oh, this is cool, this is going to change things, but I don't think any single human being knew the magnitude that the internet would change, or then the cell phone or the smartphone, just like boom, it just like, and to try,
Crazy,
yeah, and to try to communicate what it's like pre-internet is just like another planet, another world. It's just like you can't even communicate to the people who grew up with internet.
yeah. It's such a different. I mean, I grew up in the country too. I grew up in rural southern Maryland, and like compared to that, like growing up in the '90s, the '80s and '90s, it's like we were just isolated. Like I'd be out in the country and had like a few friends like within a few miles or something, and like we wouldn't see many people, and like and then you go to now, and it's just think about like how different things are now. You just got everybody with at a moment's notice ready to talk to a whole crowd of people out there. It's such a weird I mean, how could it not affect us in major ways? And it's just so different.
There's a lot of just pressure to respond instantaneous, especially since the internet came out when I was in high school, got commercialized, I should say, and I'm from Silicon Valley, so a lot of the culture was just like, let's get going, let's move. And now that instantaneous reaction is still going on, but really, a lot of times it's better to just like step back and think. But the people who grew up pre-internet are too slow, where they kind of have like some of the right answers, but because the people who grew up with like instantaneous responses, gratification, then they just expect these things when they weren't even shown. And it's really hard to show them that things take time. Like if you just if you think about things, you let things simmer, and then you're just like, oh, which I try to like, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, they try to like talk to people younger than them. So I really like talking to like Ryan Fee, Dylan Weissman. I had Thal on recently, their generation, because they literally grew up with internet. So obviously we know how powerful the internet is. I'm like, okay, so what was it like? And then I watched how they reacted to that phenomenon. And now these 20-year-olds grew up with like a more developed internet. So I kind of I'm going to rely on people like 10 years younger than me to kind of bridge the gap between me and people like 20 years younger than me. Because I'm just like, oh my Lord. And it's just that like this happens in entertainment too, where people are always like, oh, movies used to be better. I'm like, no. The movies back then fit to your life and what you were going through. The movies today are actually technically better and more exploitative, but they're fitting for generation. Yeah, go on.
And there's more better movies now. There's a higher number of better movies, even though there's a lot of shit movies too. But yeah.
There's a lot of shit movies. Yeah, go ahead.
To your point, I think if I had to say the main way, I think social media and the internet have changed us in a sort of medium is the message way. I think it's the, like you were saying, it's the lack of attention span. It's like people want things immediately. Yeah. They don't want the nuance. It's like, and that I think is like probably the most, and I think that kind of feeds into all the other stuff. It's like they want simple messages that like black and white, yes or no messages, like good versus evil messages that like they can read a sentence and be like, well, now I have a stance on something. They don't want to, there's more of that kind of inclination, and I think social media, fosters that. It's like, I can feel it too. It's like using social media. It's for a few years, it's hard for me to sit down and read a book, even as much as I want to read more books. It's like my attention span's been kind of shot. It's harder to work on projects because I feel like all over the place, and I feel kind of like I'm used to getting all this stimulation and different sources of stuff and reading multiple messages in a minute. And that I think is the destructive thing that I see playing out. It's like feeding into everything else. It's like we've just trained ourselves to be like a rat at the feeder bar, like constantly getting stimulation,
So yeah, one of the things that's hard for the internet generation, or the people who grew up with the internet, is it's hard to prove that things take time. So like, we know this because we grew up pre-internet. Like, oh, if you just like spend X time on this or work on this or wait this time, like you will get results. But how do you communicate that to somebody who's just like instant gratification, instant results, where it's like you tell them, spend 4 years on this, spend 10,000 hours on this, read this, that, watch this video, and this result, which you don't know is going to happen yet, will happen, and it's positive. So it's tough because we can't transfer experience, and like nobody likes being lectured, nobody likes being talked down to. So how do we like bridge that? I don't know. It's
tough, and everybody wants this immediate. People have been trained to kind of be a bit entitled, and also like they want immediate change, and it's like, whether no matter what you're talking about, change is slow in society. Very slow. It's like you might have like 4 steps forward but take 3 steps back, and then it's like whatever issue you're looking at, it's like these things just cannot happen overnight, but it seems like so many people, I mean, it's we get back to like they're the most loud people too, the people that seem the most impatient or that seem the most upset. It's not everyone, it's a vocal majority that seem that act as if like obviously it's 2020, everything should be perfect, and in the way I see it by now, it's like we're this is a drop of a it's a very small period of time we're in. Like when you look at like all the societal advancements and technology advancements, we're in the blink of an eye. It's like people act like, well, we're in 2020, we have all this technology, shouldn't we be so advanced? It's like you might want to be patient, because there could still be very big, well, as we've seen, there could be very big fallbacks along the way to whatever you think is progress.
So like there are parables that kind of explain phenomena that kind of help, where like you and I, we're going to acknowledge that we have our view, and then some people not only may not agree, it doesn't even benefit them to geared towards our view, but hopefully it's more of like it benefits as a whole to at least get the information out there and just think about it, and then how you want to react to it. First, obviously, give them time to react, and then what you want to do with it, sure, because we have people who don't get along with us, and don't have, like, they have their interests, we have our interests, and just kind of go from there. So it's like the story where the crow has, there's water, needs to drink water, and the glass is half full, and you're just putting like one pebble at a time, and then the water rises up. So that's kind of like we're just throwing in our pebble, hopefully other people throw in pebbles, and then eventually the water rises.
When I wrote that how social media divides us piece, I mean, I tried to write that in a non-political way. Like these are the fact that social media increases animosity should be something everybody thinks of, no matter political party, no matter what issue you're even talking about. It's like, because if you just think about like how much more persuasive it is to take a more understanding tone, to take a more persuasive tone, like no matter what issue or what political party you're in, like just think about how much, like, take politics for example, like how close the elections are. If you just think about just a good percentage of people being more persuasive, being more understanding on either side, like just imagine how that could influence things and win a few percentage of people over. It's like these are good strategies, no matter, they're not only are they just correct in terms of like understanding where unreasonable hatred and unreasonable animosity are. There, once you understand that, I feel like you just become a much better persuasive person, because you're focused on what the actual issues are, and and less focused on like, I just hate these people because they are X, it's like, and you're just able to persuade people more. And like people push back on that on both sides. Obviously they're like, yeah, of course we should hate each other for these reasons, but it's like, just think about how much more people you would win to your side by being persuasive and trying to argue, like explain why you see things the way you do. And I think it's just good advice no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, I might have the wrong book on this. And I think it was Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, where it sounds like tone-wise I might have the wrong book. But basically, like, one soldier and another soldier were just like, they're across the river and they're on opposing sides. So like, you seem like an okay guy, like, but they're on different teams, and they're supposed to fight to the death when the war goes down, and it's brutal with it.
Right. And I think with extreme political polarization, I mean that is kind of how it happens. It's like there's a buildup of just like us versus them, and it stops being about any specific issues and starts just mainly being about sides and like hate versus the side, and that becomes increasingly dehumanizing, and just like, you said wars being fought. It's like you have to dehumanize the other side in order to kill them, and that's the troubling thing. Yeah, it's like we need to talk more about issues and less about teams.
Yeah. So before we got on this, I texted you this morning and we talked, and I was like, this is a phenomenon that happens, and it's very noticeable for me as I'm involved with like the online world, Live at the Bike, and the bike. So behind the computer screen, we are like Neo in Matrix. We are the one. Like, this is our world. Like, I follow who I want to. I block whoever I want to. This is my goal. If like somebody types something I don't agree with, they're the enemy. And it's my like, motivation, duty, justice, my calling to just like make sure that I'm right. And then behind a computer screen, I don't have to listen to the other person, whatever I don't want to. And like, I'm just going to hammer me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And it's something that just struck me the other day. It's like a conversation online is not really a conversation. It's just a series of people making statements. Like, you're crafting your statement. It's like it's like, we don't talk obviously the way we talk in person, which is like a back and forth, and online we're just like making
One
pronouncements from a
statement.
balcony. Like, here's what I think, and then there's somebody else making a pronouncement from a balcony. Here's my statement. It's not a conversation. You know?
Right.
Even on Facebook, when you go back and forth with a thread or whatever, it's not a conversation.
It's a little bit better on Facebook because at least you're 1 or 2 degrees away from the other person. But in social media, on Twitter, you're just like yelling at a void in which like certain variables exist in your world that may not be representative of like the actual world.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I'd argue it's pretty bad on Facebook too, because even
okay,
interacting with
I'll
people,
default to you. Yeah, yeah.
even with people I know, it's like I'll make a statement and I just feel like it often just seems so rude. Like you read the statement you made later to someone in the conversation and the thread in Facebook, the responses, and you're like, just I sounded like a dick there. Like I wasn't meaning to, but like it just
Yeah.
and other people's statements are often perceived as dickish because it just sounds like people were like, here's my statement, here's what I believe, you know, and not like, yeah. But I mean, you're right that Twitter is obviously much worse because we don't have those
No connection.
ties.
The
Yeah,
connections, the industries and the interests and the people rather than
yeah,
like, degrees. But there's good and bad for both. But yeah, you're right. Like I've reread statements I've said or typed and I've said, and I'm just like, oh, that's probably not good. But at the same time, especially if it's like a no-win situation, I'm like, I don't even know the right answer. I could calibrate to be a little bit less, a little bit more, and just like
right.
it kind of is what it is. Like I
Well, I
am.
think
Yeah,
we have to be more forgiving of each other too. It's like, you know, in the same way that I forgive myself for sounding like a dick sometimes, I
it's
should.
not your fault. It's not
Yeah,
your
it's
fault.
not your fault, man.
Yeah,
It's not your
yeah,
fault. Yeah, everybody needs a Goodwill Hunting. You know, we all need to, and we also need to say like it's not the other people's fault
yeah.
too.
It is
You know?
our
Yeah,
part of it is our fault.
yeah. It's like we all need to be more forgiving. It's like I was just getting ready to apologize to somebody who I said sounded like a moron on Twitter. You know, I was like, I thought about it. I was like, why did I say that? You know, it's like but we all need to. If somebody did that to me, I try to be like, yeah, I've done that to people, you know, and I didn't really mean much harm by it in the moment, and I should forgive them. You know, we all need to be forgiving, and that's the thing I think about social media is it drives us to become the worst versions of ourselves, but we need to try to avoid that, and we also need to be forgiving of people because we know that about social media.
Yeah, that's part of the whole thing of us starting down this path and the Social Dilemma coming out on Netflix, which thankful for that. Plus, I'm sure there is some stuff manipulative in there, but yeah, the major phenomenon is that's real. And then, you writing the how social media divides us, and then part one of this podcast, part two, and maybe we'll keep going as it adjusts because some stuff that I experienced yesterday and this morning, like I just thought of, and then I just like hit you up, and it's just like a never-ending adjustment process in which we don't know the answers either. Maybe there are no answers, but at least if we can mitigate the damage,
Yeah, we
it's
can just
better.
commentate as the world burns. You know, we can just be along for the ride. What was I going to say? Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, hopefully it comes back. But just like people may have like usually people in the poker world, especially if they have an individual brand, there's like they're in that zone where they follow who they want. They're their own style, and if they don't want to deal with somebody, they could block it out. Which is again why the Negreanu and Doug Polk thing went off. It's because they're in their own worlds behind the computer screen. They're fighting for the soul of poker or their perceived soul of poker, and then that's where they collide. Whereas like Live at the Bike is different. Live at the Bike is like an inside scoop of the Los Angeles poker scene. It mostly does No Limit on screen because the other forms are less watchable than No Limit. But as I've been posting on social media, Limit Hold'em in the mid-high stakes is actually slightly healthier than No Limit Hold'em, which I'm showing evidence. I know nobody cares, but I'm just like I'm just backing up my statements because it's just data. At the low stakes like 2-3 No Limit, it's larger. It's a larger pool than Limit Hold'em. But 7-card stud, which used to be big, is like now defunct. Mixed games and PLO are rising in prominence. But like that's the thing. Like I'm there in person. Like when people see me on camera, it's like okay, I'm talking to you. I'm like the center. Maybe it's perceived that I have a personal brand like these other guys, but no. Like I knock on wood, will be employed back at the bike again. in which I'm kind of a liaison, but I am nowhere near like the one calling the shots. There's like upper management, there's like, the CEO, the owners, the C-level execs. It's just like I'm just a representative in this space. That being said, like, for Live at the Bike, I'm an owner, I'm part of it, but my say is not the end all either. Like there's like discussion, there's some stuff that I believe in that, I have to back off on, the others do too. I have, another company where I am the CEO, so like I call the shots, but I respect the people I work with and they're my friends too. So like I tell them, like, you don't agree with something, call me out. And I have close enough friendships and good enough relationships with them where I may not agree with them, but I value, I really want to hear their opinion because in case I'm missing something. And we know each other well enough. It's like if I don't listen to them or they don't listen to me, you're your own person, your own world. Like, I'm just giving my honest 2 cents of what I think should be done. So in that sense, I can't be that person who's polarized, like my view, because I'm like, when I'm at the bike, I'm already just with hundreds of people, and yeah, my voice is a little bit more impactful than 100 people, but in essence, the poker and the casino that's the king. It revolves around that. Like, in rank wise, like the hosts at the bike over, they have a higher rank than me, but we are mutually respectful of each other's territory, so to say. And I try to help them. They try to help me with our individual things. But this is just so different from like, say, Upswing versus Solve for Why versus Crush Live Poker versus Run It Once. Like, as we talked about last time, when you think about Upswing and you see Doug Polk, you think like that's it, Doug Polk, Upswing. But the president's actually Matt Coletta, and the co-founders are Ryan Fee and Doug Polk. And I think Brady's like the VP. So I don't know how they're structured, but me being involved in like several companies, especially in different importances, like I see like, all the moving parts and how you're supposed to, you're supposed to do everything. You're supposed to contribute to a cause, which is the company. And then there's like a president, a co-founder, a VP, and just like whatever. But really it's like you're all contributing to a cause. And then this cause of Upswing is like, different from Crush Live Poker, from Solve for Why, from Run It Once. And they're all trying to do their thing, and they're all in the same space. Now what? So that's something from the outside. You see Crush Live Poker, Bart Hansen, Upswing Poker, Doug Polk, Run It Once, like Phil Galfond, with other names as well. Solve for Why, Matt Berkey, and, Christian Soto. But just like, these are all like perceptions and intangibles. Whereas like it, from Live the Bike's sake, is like, look, these are the players from LA. These are the games. This is what's going on. It's a little bit, it's biased, but I hope that my word and my credibility is, I will accommodate for that bias. I will tell you what's going on. Like, we have to do certain things on camera because it's just better. Like, if we have a $1, $2 mixed games and nobody watches, even if that's an accurate representation, what's the point? So, we're going to showcase what's watchable, and, hopefully me being in LA and online for almost 20 years, I could calibrate that kind of expectation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I would watch some limit poker, some high stakes limit poker.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to get like a high stakes. I mean, we had it planned, like something like 500, 1,000, like limit hold'em, whatever we could get, whether it's just 200, 400, or 500, 1,000, or 1,000, 2,000. Like, it'll happen. So one of the goals that I had for Live with Bike is representing the high stakes scene, like, accurately. Like, the high stakes scene is was pretty well distributed, like 2020, 2020, 20. Now the 7-card stud is defunct, but depending on who's playing for fun, which obviously creates the game, that's when the no limit, the PLO, the mixed game, or the limit hold'em runs. It's not like, oh, I'm a no limit player, so therefore high stakes no limit should run. It's like, no, we revolve around who the game revolves around. So, like, it is right now, it's pretty split like relatively evenly, like mixed game, PLO, no limit, and limit hold'em. And for the people, I would say like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they have their identity tied to one form of poker. Many of us, especially in the high stakes, play almost all the form. Well, I don't know. There's some specialists, but a lot of us play a lot of the forms in which, yeah, we suffer from not necessarily being a specialist anymore, but we can also choose between limit hold'em and no limit hold'em, PLO or mixed game, and whichever game's the best out of those, we could just go, and then there's win rate. But in the live setting, nobody can really prove their win rate. You just whoever shows up every day, which is, again, with this podcast, it's kind of like, I don't really, if I get somebody big, cool, like, and big, like, you know, Ryan Fee, Dan Zach, that's legit, that's great. But I'll have like Blake or Sean Snyder, which many people don't know who they are, but they're there almost every day in the high stakes scene. And that's like, I'm trying to do the red pill poker thing. Like, this is the truth. Like, if you don't want to listen, all right, whatever. Like, I'm not taking pictures of the chip porn. I'm not talking about, oh my God, I'm like killing it every day. It's like, dude, there are downswings. There are a lot of lives ruined. There's different ways to handle this industry. You know, you could be high stakes pro, mid stakes pro, low stakes pro. You could build content. You could be a prop. You could, you know, go into broadcast. You could do all these different things. And it's not just poker. Like, people have this like linear thought because in the media of every industry of just like, oh, got to make it to that, you know, that multi-millionaire, that billionaire echelon, where there's just like so much in between. And there's so much shaming from like the people that are like ignorant people that are just like, oh, this person's better than that person. I'm like, okay, you know what it takes to get to being that person. Like, if you're at a sporting event, the crowd's booing this player and he's like number 10 in the world. Like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, you know, and like, who are you to like boo this guy? Like, I get it, it's fun, it's a sporting event, but like, you know, maybe it's time we step back. I mean, and I'm probably gonna get yelled at for this too, because it's like the Jerry Maguire moment where it's like, we should care about our clients. Oh, you're fired.
Yeah, some people just care too much. It's like, it's not just not just fun and games, obviously, because some people get in fights over, you know, sporting events. So not just fun and games.
Yeah, it's insane, and it just like, you know, even in like, again, like, our view is biased towards poker and the casino environment, which is more towards like, especially with the bad reputation of like, you know, casinos and poker, where it's like fair play. Let's like hammer down that this is fair play, and it's a skill game, even though there's a lot of variance. You know, there's more variance than a lot of other industries except Wall Street. But
I just thought of an interesting analogy between people thinking the election is rigged and people thinking online poker is rigged. But maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Oh no, go ahead. Fire
no.
away.
I just had the, you know, speaking of poker and real world analogies, you know, I'll think about that more.
I think you're on a good track, because like I would have insight on this matter too. So like, you know, I have Lyman on, you know, another podcast and channel, and one of the things is like, if you want to maximize profits, usually you don't play in the highest stakes games. If you're an elite, alpha and elite player, not just elite player, but alpha elite, yeah, you're probably best to stay in the highest stakes games, something like, you know, Garrett, Andy, Ike Caxton, Scott Seaver. Like, when you're that, or, you know, True Teller, Linus Love, if you're that echelon, then whatever, you sit in any goddamn game you want and just like win. But like, if you're a little bit under there, you're probably better off in the second tier game. Your win rate will be better. You will dominate the competition more, and there's less likely to be sketchy things. And I don't think any of the high stakes, you know, elite players are going to disagree with me. There are sketchy things that happen in high stakes. Obviously, for online, there was Pot Ripper. You know, you never know you're being super used. I was naive and innocent in my past, and I was like, you know, I thought there might have been fair play. In retrospect, there might have been some foul play, and I was like, well, I could bear the brunt of this world, or I could step down. And poker just, you know, it's a thing for me, but it's not tied to my identity, so I could just step down. But just like, you know, random number generators in you know, there's no such thing as a random number generator. in machines. So that's something. There's also like super users, card sharing, people who are friends with each other, which happens in the super high roller bowl, which I talked about with Thallo, which is like, yeah, you could rip on Helmuth, but there's also the German group, the this elite group, this elite group. You're almost like ganging up on like an individual person. So like now you're throwing shade, and I'm just like, okay, well let's talk about what's really going on. Like, is there soft play? Is there action exchanging? Is this truly a fair competition? If it's not a fair competition, what are you ripping on them for? So,
yeah. Well, yeah, we could. I'll think more about that, but I gotta go. I gotta work on some stuff.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah. Thanks for the conversation.
Okay.
Good
so,
stuff.
All right. Shout out to Natty Wit, and we'll probably continue this when we have more ideas on this. And hope you guys enjoy this.